Before you could speak your own name, before your mind had yet shaped its first clear thought, a tapestry was already being woven around you. Threads of expectation, language, culture, and unspoken laws were stitched into the fabric of your being. You did not choose the loom. You did not choose the pattern. And yet, by the time you could take your first conscious breath, the design was already well underway. They called it you. But it was something else entirely. A costume sewn by invisible hands, a role scripted long before you stepped onto the stage. This was the false identity installed in you at birth, and it has followed you like a shadow so intimate you've mistaken it for your skin. It is a strange inheritance. We imagine our first moments as blank slates, open fields waiting for the seeds of selfhood to grow. But in truth, we are born into a garden already planted, tended not by our own will, but by generations before us. The soil is thick with traditions, beliefs, and fears that are older than memory. By the time you can crawl, you have already learned to move in ways that please, to avoid sounds that anger, to mimic the shapes of faces around you. It feels natural, effortless even, but beneath that ease lies the first layer of the spell. The false identity is not a crude thing. It is not merely a mask strapped onto your face. It is woven delicately into your sense of reality, so deeply that you begin to think it is reality. Think of a river that has been guided into channels by stone walls. The water flows as though the path were its choice, unaware of the vast floodplain it will never touch. From the moment you are named, categorized, and praised or scolded according to rules you did not write, your mind becomes the water, your culture the stone. Every current of desire, every surge of emotion finds itself funneled through this hidden architecture. You may believe you are free to choose, but your choices are already framed by the boundaries they set long before you opened your eyes. The power of this hidden architecture lies not in force, but in subtlety. The spell is not cast with obvious chains, but with lullabies and smiles. It is sustained by the stories told at bedtime, the holidays celebrated in your name, the lessons repeated so often they dissolve into the air you breathe. This is who we are. This is what life means. This is the way things are. The words are simple, almost tender, but each one is a thread pulled tight, binding you to an identity you never fully consented to wear. Some part of you, perhaps the quietest part, has always known this. There are moments, rare and fleeting, when you catch the glint of something beneath the mask. Perhaps it is in the way your heart leaps at a horizon you have never seen, or in the sudden sense of dissonance when someone praises you for playing a role you despise. These are the whispers from the self that existed before the installation, the self that still lingers, waiting for you to remember. But to remember is dangerous. The spell resists exposure, for its survival depends on your belief that it is you, and so it will do everything it can to keep you dreaming. Breaking such a spell is no small thing. To attempt it is to risk not only losing the identity they gave you, but also stepping into a space where the ground feels uncertain, where nothing is yet defined. The human mind clings to the familiar, even when the familiar is a cage. And so many spend their lives perfecting the performance, polishing the mask, mistaking applause for freedom. They learn to laugh at the right moments, to grieve in acceptable ways, to pursue the goals that have been pre-approved by the invisible architects. They call this maturity, responsibility, adulthood. In truth, it is often only a deeper entanglement in the web that was spun before they had a choice. But there is another path, one that begins in quiet rebellion. Not the rebellion of loud defiance, but the rebellion of deep seeing. When you begin to observe the mask rather than simply wear it, something remarkable happens. You create space between yourself and the identity they installed. That space is the first crack in the spell. It may be small at first, a hairline fracture through which only a sliver of light can pass. But if you nurture it, if you allow curiosity to slip in through that opening, the fracture will grow, the light will spread, and soon the illusion will no longer be seamless. To see the false identity is to realize that much of what you thought was you is a collection of borrowed garments. Some were draped on you by your parents, some by the schools you attended, others by the society that rewarded you for fitting in. Each layer told you who you were supposed to be, and in exchange for wearing it well, you were offered belonging, approval, and the warm illusion of safety. To remove these garments is to risk the cold. But it is also to feel the air on your skin for the first time. There is a cosmic dimension to this, for the spell is not unique to you. It is the condition of humanity itself. Every civilization has its own mask-making ritual, its own way of molding individuals into compliant parts of a larger story. This is why the struggle to awaken is ancient. Philosophers, mystics, and visionaries across time have spoken of the same prison under different names. Plato's cave, the veil of Maya, the dream of the world. And in every telling, there is the same truth. What you take to be you is often a reflection cast by forces you cannot see, and to break free, you must turn toward the source of light rather than the shadows on the wall. The breaking of the spell is not a single act, but a journey. It begins with suspicion, grows into awareness, and matures into the courageous act of unbecoming. To unbecome is to peel away the layers without knowing exactly what lies beneath, to step into the uncharted terrain of your own essence. It is both liberation and loss, for you will shed not only what was false, but also the comforts that came with it. Yet beyond that, shedding lies something far greater. The original self, the one that existed before the world told you who you were supposed to be. And so the invitation is not merely to reject what is false, but to remember what is real. To awaken from the dream is to face a reality that is raw, unfiltered, and alive. It is to live without the borrowed armor of a constructed identity, to speak in a voice that is wholly your own, and to act not from inherited scripts, but from the living truth of this moment. That truth is waiting for you, just beyond the edges of the mask. All it asks is that you have the courage to reach for it, to feel the first crack in the spell, and choose not to turn away. To truly understand the false identity installed at birth, we must wander deeper into the labyrinth where its foundations lie. This is not a simple tangle of childhood habits or inherited phrases. It is an architecture, a living, breathing edifice constructed over centuries, designed to shape not just your behavior, but your perception of what is possible, what is real, what is you. It is both delicate and formidable, like a spider's web spun between the pillars of your life, invisible until the right angle of light reveals it. At its heart, the false identity thrives on one simple mechanism: separation. From the moment you arrive in this world, you are taught subtly, insistently, that you are a distinct entity, apart from everything and everyone else. Your name becomes the first spell word, drawing a line between you and the infinite path between self and other. The second spell word is comparison. You are better than this one, worse than that one, smarter than her, slower than him. And the third is conditional worth. You are lovable when you achieve, acceptable when you conform, safe when you obey. Each of these threads is soft enough to feel harmless, yet together they weave a net that narrows the sky. This architecture is reinforced through what could be called cultural gravity. Just as planets remain in orbit because of invisible forces, your thoughts and choices are pulled toward the center of the identity they have given you. You may feel as though you wander freely, but step too far from the approved trajectory, and you feel the tug, the raised eyebrow, the withheld affection, the quiet or loud punishments that remind you to stay in your lane. This is not always malicious. Often, it is driven by those who genuinely believe they are protecting you. They cannot see that they are guarding not you, but the mask they have mistaken for you. Another essential pillar of the false identity is narrative inheritance. Before you even speak your first words, you are being written into a story. This story comes with characters, your family, your community, your ancestors, settings, the neighborhood, the nation, the cultural landscape, and plot lines, the right path, the successful life, the respectable choices. You do not author this story. You are simply cast in a role. And because the human mind craves story like the body craves air, you embrace it before you can even imagine that another story exists. This is how the spell becomes self-sustaining. You are given a script, and when you perform it well, you are rewarded with approval and belonging. The false identity also depends on illusion. Illusions so total they become invisible. One such illusion is that the self is fixed and knowable, that you are one permanent thing from birth to death. But the truth, glimpsed only by those who dare to question, is that selfhood is fluid, mutable, and vast. Another illusion is that the external world defines your internal reality. You are taught to chase validation, to collect symbols of success, to adjust yourself to fit the image that wins applause. Yet the applause is hollow, for it is directed not at your essence, but at the costume you've perfected. Control over language plays a crucial role in maintaining the spell. Words are not neutral. They shape the contours of thought. You are given labels early on: good or bad, smart or slow, pretty or plain, boy or girl, believer or skeptic. Each label carries expectations, and each expectation shapes your choices. This is why so many never question the boundaries of their identity. They have never been given the words to imagine something beyond it. Language can liberate, but in the hands of the architects, it binds. Fear is the final unspoken cornerstone. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of the unknown self that might emerge if the mask were removed. This fear is rarely taught directly. Instead, it is absorbed through countless small experiences. A child speaks a truth that disrupts the family myth and is met with silence. A teenager dresses outside the norm and is met with ridicule. An adult considers walking away from a stable but deadening job and is met with warnings about ruin and regret. Over time, the lesson seeps in. It is safer to remain who they think you are than to risk becoming who you truly are. Yet within this architecture lies a paradox. The very elements that bind you, the story, the language, the expectations, also carry the keys to your liberation. Because once you see them, once you can trace the lines of the architecture in your own mind, you can begin to choose. Awareness is the solvent of the spell. The first step toward breaking it is not smashing the structure in rage, but learning to walk its halls with eyes open, to see the scaffolding for what it is. This is why awakening often feels like both an ending and a beginning. The ending comes as you watch your old story unravel, thread by thread, no longer able to believe in its inevitability. The beginning comes as you realize that life without the false identity is not a void, but an open sky. Yet the open sky is overwhelming at first. After all, you have lived so long inside the walls that they have come to feel like home. You will be tempted to rebuild them, to stitch together a new mask from the remnants of the old. But the deeper work is to resist that temptation and remain in the vastness long enough for your true self to emerge. It is here that the cosmic dimension reveals itself again. The false identity is not merely a personal inconvenience. It is part of a larger pattern in which entire societies are built upon shared illusions. Each generation installs the mask on the next, believing it to be the foundation of order. And perhaps at one stage of human evolution, it was. Perhaps the mask once served as a bridge between chaos and civilization. But what was once a bridge has become a cage, and what was once protection now stifles the soul. To break the spell is not just to reclaim your life, it is to participate in the slow evolution of human consciousness. Every individual who steps out of their assigned identity sends a tremor through the collective. Every act of living authentically, of speaking in the voice beneath the mask, weakens the architecture for those who come after. In this way, the journey is both profoundly personal and profoundly communal. You are freeing yourself, but you are also loosening the bonds for others who may not yet have the courage to act. And so, the core themes of this work come into focus. Separation as the seed of illusion, narrative inheritance as the mask's script, language as both prison and key, fear as the invisible warden, and awareness as the first breach in the walls. These are not abstract ideas. They are the living patterns that shape your days, your relationships, your sense of self. To recognize them is to take the first step toward reclaiming the authorship of your own life. The question that remains is how these patterns can be illuminated not through analysis alone, but through the deeper language of story and symbol, the timeless art of speaking to the soul in images it cannot ignore. Imagine a grand theater, older than memory itself, where every soul that enters is given a costume, a mask, and a script. The moment you are born, you are ushered backstage. The attendants, your parents, teachers, culture, dress you quickly, tenderly, even lovingly. They tell you the lines you must recite, the emotions you must portray, the ways you must move when the curtain rises. You have no time to ask questions. The performance has already begun. Out in the seats, the audience waits, eager for you to play your part. They do not care who you are without the mask. They only care that you fit the story they came to see. This is the first allegory, the theater of the mask. The mask, though it hides your face, soon begins to shape it. Wear it long enough and your features conform to its contours. Your voice adjusts to its resonance. Your gestures align with its limitations. You forget the feeling of your own skin, the sound of your unfiltered voice. Sometimes, in the stillness between acts, you might hear a faint knocking from within, as if some deeper self were trapped beneath layers of papier-mâché, trying to remind you it still breathes. But the orchestra swells, the spotlight burns bright, and you return to the lines you've been given. The show must go on. The second allegory is the mirror that remembers. In this story, a child is raised in a hall filled with mirrors. But these are no ordinary mirrors. They are distorted, bending and twisting every reflection to fit a certain ideal. When the child smiles, the mirrors show a brighter, wider smile than the one on their face. When they frown, the mirrors sharpen it into something more palatable or more menacing, depending on what the keepers of the hall desire. Over time, the child stops trusting their own eyes and begins to believe only what the mirrors show. Years pass, and one day, wandering in a forgotten corridor, the grown child finds a single mirror covered in dust. It is unpolished, imperfect, and yet, for the first time, it shows a reflection that feels real. The eyes staring back are unfamiliar, but they stir something ancient. This mirror remembers a name the child had before the world renamed them. But the moment is fleeting. The other mirrors call out, louder, more flattering, more familiar. It takes great courage to keep looking into that dusty glass and ignore the chorus of illusions. The third allegory is the puppet and the strings. You are the puppet, carved skillfully from the material of your birth, strung together with cords of expectation, fear, and hope. The puppet does not see the puppeteers. They stand in the shadows, pulling the strings with practiced ease. They make the puppet dance, speak, bow, and fight according to their design. And yet, one day, the puppet begins to notice the strange pull on its limbs. The steps feel repetitive, the speech is hollow. In a moment of rebellion, it lifts its head and catches sight of the strings. This is the beginning of awakening. Not the cutting of the cords, but the realization they exist. The puppet does not yet know how to move without them, but now every tug is felt as an intrusion, every movement as a negotiation. The dance can never again be innocent. These stories may sound like fables, but they are the maps of the inner landscape. Each one reflects a facet of the false identity. The theater speaks to the performance we learn to perfect for the approval of others. The mirror reveals the way our perception of self is shaped by distorted feedback, often designed to keep us within the boundaries of the acceptable. The puppet reminds us of the unseen forces, cultural, familial, psychological, that guide our actions long after we believe ourselves to be free. But there is another story, less told, the keeper of the gate. In this narrative, there is a walled city where every citizen is known by a name assigned at birth. The keeper's job is to ensure no one leaves without their assigned identity intact. Beyond the walls lies the wild expanse, the place where no roles are fixed, where names dissolve into the wind. Many citizens dream of this place, but few approach the gate. Those who do are met by the keeper, who whispers their name in such a way that it feels like a weight in their chest. The keeper reminds them of their obligations, their debts, the love they will lose if they walk away. Some turn back, comforted by the familiarity of the city. But a few, just a few, step forward anyway, their name falling from them like an old garment, their footsteps carrying them into the nameless expanse. This story matters because the keeper is not an external guard. It is the voice within you, the one that rises up whenever you begin to drift beyond the lines of your conditioned self. It warns you of ruin, of loneliness, of danger. It tells you that the mask is safety, the script is purpose, the strings are security. The keeper speaks in the tone of your own mind, so you mistake it for truth. But its power fades the moment you recognize it for what it is, a final trick of the spell, a guardian not of your freedom, but of your imprisonment. These symbolic narratives are not meant to replace analysis. They are meant to bypass it. The conscious mind often resists truths that threaten its stability, but the soul understands in images, in metaphors, in archetypes. That is why a story can slip past the defenses and plant a seed that logic alone could never root. You may forget the exact words of a lecture, but the image of the puppet seeing its strings will haunt you until you are ready to act on it. The mask, the mirror, the puppet, the gate. These symbols echo in myths from every culture. They are variations on the same truth, that human beings are born into a dream shaped by those who came before, and that awakening requires a journey through layers of illusion. Sometimes the journey begins with a shock, sometimes with a whisper, sometimes with a story that lodges in your heart like a splinter and refuses to dissolve. Breaking the spell, in the language of these narratives, is not about violence against the old structures. It is about reclaiming your reflection from the distorting mirrors, setting down the mask until your skin can breathe again, learning to move in ways that are not dictated by strings. It is about walking past the keeper, feeling the terror rise and fall, and discovering that the wild expanse beyond the walls is not empty, it is infinite. And yet, these stories also hold a warning. The false identity does not vanish in a single act of defiance. The mask will call to you, the mirrors will tempt you, the strings will twitch in familiar rhythms. You will be invited, again and again, to return to the comfort of the role, to the safety of the city. The spell is not broken once. It is broken every day you choose to live without it. That is why the symbolic language matters. It reminds you that your journey is not unique, that countless others have walked the same hidden roads. They too have faced the theater, the mirrors, the puppeteers, and the gate. And they too have stepped, trembling, into the light of their own unborrowed being. To walk out of the theater, to step beyond the gate, to cut the strings, or at least loosen them, is not a purely mystical exercise. The work is not only in dreams, metaphors, or quiet revelations beneath a tree. The breaking of the spell must eventually touch the ground beneath your feet, altering the way you move through an ordinary Tuesday, the way you speak to the person at the market, the way you listen to your own breath in the dark. Without integration, awakening remains a fleeting glimpse, a momentary flash of lightning in a long night. But with integration, it becomes a steady fire, illuminating not only your inner life, but the very fabric of the world you inhabit. The first reality you face in this integration is disorientation. Without the mask, the map you once used no longer fits. The landmarks that guided your decisions, approval, tradition, external measures of success, lose their authority. A job you once pursued with single-minded devotion may suddenly feel hollow. Relationships built on your old role may shift uncomfortably or even dissolve. You might find yourself in rooms where you no longer know the right lines to say because the script was part of the spell. This stage is unsettling, but it is also fertile. The disorientation is a sign that you are no longer living entirely by the coordinates of the false identity. Practically, this means learning to sit with uncertainty without rushing to fill it with another mask. The temptation to replace the old identity with a shiny new one is immense. This new mask may be more appealing, perhaps the free spirit, the enlightened one, the rebel, but it is still a mask if it becomes another rigid role you perform for approval. Integration requires patience, a willingness to dwell in the open space between selves, where you respond not from habit or expectation, but from the living truth of the moment. In relationships, integration often reveals itself in the form of boundaries. Under the spell, you may have said yes when you meant no, agreed when you disagreed, bent yourself into shapes that pleased others but starved your soul. Without the mask, you begin to speak differently. You decline invitations that drain you. You allow silence to stand where before you would have rushed to fill it. You stop apologizing for existing in your natural form. These shifts may feel small, but they ripple outward. People around you may resist, confuse your new clarity with coldness, or accuse you of changing. But this is not a betrayal of who you are. It is the unveiling of who you have always been. Work and purpose also undergo a transformation. The false identity is often tied to careers that were chosen not out of passion, but out of obligation or fear. Perhaps you pursued stability at the cost of aliveness, or status at the cost of peace. Breaking the spell does not necessarily mean quitting your job tomorrow, but it does mean you begin to ask questions you never dared to ask before. Does this work express my true self? Does it nourish me as much as it demands from me? If not, what steps could I take, small or large, toward a livelihood that reflects my authentic values? One of the most challenging aspects of real-world integration is language. The words you once used to describe yourself may feel foreign now. You may hesitate when someone asks, "So what do you do?" Or, "Who are you?" The simplest answer, your name and profession, no longer seems to hold the truth. This can make social exchanges awkward, but it is also an opportunity to speak more from essence than from label. You might say less, but what you say carries more reality. You might tell a story instead of offering a title. In doing so, you subtly invite others to look beyond the surface of their own answers. Daily life becomes a practice ground for awareness. Buying groceries, you notice how marketing tries to shape your desires. In conversation, you feel the urge to perform and choose instead to listen. Waiting in traffic, you observe the mind's stories about time and worth. None of these moments are dramatic, but they are the real battlegrounds where the spell either reasserts itself or loosens its hold. Integration is not one heroic leap. It is 1,000 small refusals to slip back into unconsciousness. Community plays an essential role in sustaining this way of living. The false identity thrives in isolation, feeding off the belief that you are alone in your longing for truth. But when you gather with others who are also dismantling their masks, something extraordinary happens. You recognize each other in ways words cannot capture. You share not just ideas, but the lived experience of stepping outside the walls. Such connections can be rare, but they are worth seeking, for they offer both refuge and mirror. There is also the matter of compassion. As you see the architecture of the spell more clearly in yourself, you begin to notice it everywhere. In strangers on the bus, in leaders on television, in loved ones who cannot yet imagine life without the mask. If you are not careful, this clarity can harden into judgment. Why can't they see it? Why don't they wake up? But compassion reminds you that you too once lived entirely within the illusion, and that breaking it is not a matter of intelligence or willpower alone. It is a matter of timing, courage, and sometimes sheer grace. Real-world integration means holding space for those still inside, even as you refuse to return. Over time, you will discover that living without the false identity is not about constant resistance, but about a different kind of flow. Instead of pushing against the current of expectation, you begin to move in harmony with the deeper current of your own being. This flow is quieter than the noise of the spell, but infinitely more powerful. It guides you toward people and places that resonate with your essence, toward choices that may look unconventional, but feel undeniably right. The implications extend beyond the personal. As more individuals live from their unborrowed selves, the collective architecture begins to shift. Systems built on conformity and fear lose their grip when enough people simply refuse to play their assigned roles. A society where the majority no longer lives under the spell would look radically different. Not because rules were rewritten from above, but because the invisible agreements that sustain the illusion were dissolved from within. The paradox is that this transformation is both intensely private and unavoidably public. You break the spell in the privacy of your own consciousness, but the moment you speak, act, or create from your authentic self, you alter the world around you. Integration is the bridge between the inner and the outer, between the vision glimpsed in the mirror that remembers and the life you live with your feet on the earth. In the end, practical integration is not about becoming a flawless emblem of truth. It is about learning to return, again and again, to that space beyond the mask, and to let it inform the smallest choices. It is about allowing your daily life, your relationships, your work, your language, your presence, to carry the quiet scent of freedom, so that others might breathe it in and remember something they thought they had lost. There comes a moment in every true journey when the road is no longer about the road itself, but about the one who walks it. You began with a question, sometimes faint, sometimes burning, about why life felt slightly out of tune, why the face in the mirror did not always match the voice in your heart. You have wandered through the theater, faced the mirrors, noticed the strings, stood before the gate. You have tasted the air beyond the walls. And now, you are here, on the threshold where reflection must become embodiment, where knowledge must become living truth. Breaking the spell is not a clean, final act, like snapping a single thread. It is more like peeling away layer after layer of a garment that has been stitched to your skin. Some layers come off easily, others cling, woven into the very fabric of your thoughts. At times, you will think you are done, only to feel the tug of an old belief or an inherited reflex pulling you back. This is not failure, it is the nature of deep transformation. The spell was cast over many years. It dissolves in stages, each one revealing more of the original self that has always been there. In this final stretch, the most important work is remembrance. The world will try to reapply the mask. Every advertisement, every cultural ritual, every conversation that assumes the old story will tug at you like a tide. The pull may be subtle, an invitation to play the role you once played so well, to exchange truth for approval, to trade freedom for the warmth of the familiar. But you have seen too much to truly go back. The memory of that dusty mirror, that unmasked breath, that first step beyond the gate, these become your compass. Living beyond the false identity is not about rejecting the world. It is about entering it more fully, without the filter of who you were told to be. It is about speaking in your own voice, even when that voice trembles. It is about standing in the marketplace of human interaction with your heart uncovered, willing to be seen and to see. There is a rawness to this, a kind of nakedness, but there is also a joy that cannot be manufactured. You begin to realize that the freedom you once thought was a destination is in fact a practice. This practice is not austere. It is not about renouncing beauty, comfort, or connection. Rather, it is about choosing them consciously, not because they are part of the script, but because they resonate with your essence. You might still enjoy the festivals of your culture, but you no longer attend as a sleepwalker. You arrive awake, aware of which parts nourish you and which you leave behind. You might still work in a conventional job, but you carry into it a different energy, refusing to barter your inner truth for a title. You might still love people who live entirely inside the mask, but you no longer pretend to be someone you are not in order to keep their approval. The deeper gift of breaking the spell is that you begin to see through the illusions that bind not only yourself, but the whole of humanity. You recognize that nations, religions, economies, all the grand structures, are built on collective masks, on stories agreed upon and rarely questioned. You see that the same forces that shaped your personal identity are at work on a global scale, and that the work of liberation is both intimate and vast. You cannot free the world in one grand gesture, but by living awake, you contribute to the quiet erosion of the great illusion. There is also humility in this. You will see people still caught in the spell, and you will remember that you once lived there too. You will not always have the right words to reach them. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to live your truth without demanding that others adopt it. In doing so, you create a living example, a presence that whispers, "It is possible." The moment they are ready, they will remember that whisper. And here's the transformational call. Do not wait for perfect readiness. Do not wait until you feel wise enough, strong enough, or untouchable. The self beneath the mask is already whole, already capable of meeting life directly. Every day you delay is another day the spell weaves itself deeper. Begin now, in small ways. Speak one truth you have been holding back. Refuse one role that no longer fits. Spend 1 hour doing something for no reason other than it is yours to do. These are not mere acts of self-expression. They are acts of reclamation. The path will ask for courage, yes, but also for gentleness. You are not at war with the false identity. You are simply choosing to outgrow it. Like an old shell that once protected you, it falls away when it is no longer needed. You can thank it for its service even as you step out of it. The breaking of the spell is not an act of violence, but of maturation, a natural shedding that happens when you are ready to bear the weight and wonder of your own unfiltered existence. Over time, the space once occupied by the mask fills with something richer. You begin to notice a deep stillness beneath the noise of thought, a stillness that was always there, but muffled. From that stillness, actions arise that feel strangely effortless, as though life itself were moving through you rather than you pushing against it. Relationships deepen, not because you have learned new techniques, but because presence is the most magnetic force in the human world. Your work, whatever form it takes, carries an authenticity that others can sense, even if they cannot name it. And perhaps most importantly, you come to trust yourself in a way you never could under the spell. The false identity was always looking outward, measuring itself against mirrors and scripts. The true self looks inward, listening to the quiet pulse of its own knowing. That knowing will sometimes lead you into uncertainty, but it will never betray you. It is the one guide that remains when all the old maps dissolve. So here you stand, at the edge of the known world, with the mask in your hand. The choice is yours, to place it back upon your face and return to the theater, or to step into the expanse where there is no script, no audience, only the vast, unfolding truth of your own being. No one can walk this final step for you. But know this, beyond the gate, others are walking too. Some ahead, some behind, all of them breathing the same unconditioned air. Take that step. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, but now. Break the spell and keep breaking it until there is nothing left between you and the life that has been waiting for you all along. The world does not need another perfect performance. It needs your unmasked presence, raw, unrepeatable, and real. And once you have lived this way, even for a single day, you will understand the deepest truth of all. They did not give you your identity at birth, and they cannot take away the one you discover when you finally wake.